Hello dear students of Standard 9. Welcome to DAV Moyle Public School. I am your social science teacher Nitin Pushpa today. Today I will take the revision of the French Revolution part 2nd. So let's start our today's online session. Okay, first point, France becomes a constitutional monarchy. Okay students, how did France become a constitutional monarchy? Listen, the National Assembly completed the draft of the constitution in 1791. Its main objective was to limit the power of monarchy. Now, the powers were separated among the different organs of the government like legislature, executive and judiciary. This change of the powers made France a constitutional monarchy. Under the new constitution, the laws were to be made by the National Assembly. The assembly was indirectly elected, that means active citizens, and voted for a group of electors who in turn choose the assembly members. Students, the constitution began with the declaration of right of man and citizens, such as the right to life, then freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, and equality before law. These were established as a natural rights, and it was the duty of the state to protect. Okay, so students, in such a way that France becomes a constitutional monarchy. Students, one important question is given here. Explain any three features of the constitution of the France drafted in 1791. It's a very important question with respect to your exam. Okay, so you read the answer of this question. The political system under the constitution of 1791. Okay students, a given picture tells us about the political system under the constitution of 1791 of France. Okay, men who were above the 24 years of age and who paid taxes equal to at least the 3 days of the laborer's wage were given the status of the active citizens. That means they had to right to vote. Okay, then the remaining men and all women were classed as a passive citizens. That means they had no right to vote. Again students, the power was shared among the three organs of the government: legislature, executive and judiciary. To equify as an elector, as a member of the assembly, a man had to belong to the highest bracket of the taxpayers. Okay students, so in such a way that with the help of this picture we can understand about the political system under the constitution of 1791 of France. Okay, next point, a role of women in revolution. Women played a very significant role in the French Revolution. Most of the women belonging to the third estate worked for a living. Only the daughters of noble and wealthier members of the third estate could study at a convent. Besides caring for their families, the French women had to cook, then fetch water, stand in queues for the bread, look after the children, etc. Their wages were always lower than the men. Women in France were disappointed with the constitution of the 1791. Why? Because they had no right to vote. Okay, it reduced them the passive citizens who had no political rights. Okay, so after with the passage of time in France, there were some laws passed by the constitution of the France. Okay, so after that some improvements were there. First, they gained the access to education. Then women could no longer be forced into marriages. Then marriage was now a contract which could be registered under the civil law. Then divorce was made legal. Again, women could train for the job, become artists or run small businesses. Okay, so in such a way that there were some reforms for the women's life. France abolished monarchy and become a republic. How? Listen, rulers of the France neighboring countries were worried by the development in France. They made plans to send troops to put down the events taking place since 1789. Before this could happen, the National Assembly declared war against Prussia, Austria in April 1792. Okay, the members of the Jacobin Club, that means students, the most successful club was the Club of Jacobins, yes, which got its name from convent of Saint Jacobin, Paris. Okay, members of the Jacobins Club belonged mainly to the less prosperous sections of the society. Yes, they joined to war. That means army of France against the Prussia and Austria. They included shopkeepers, that means in the Jacobin club included shopkeepers, artisans, cooks, shoemakers, watchmakers, printers, servants, and daily wage workers. Their leader was Maximilian Robespierre. Listen, students, Maximilian Robespierre was the leader of Jacobin Club. They dressed differently by wearing the long striped trousers similar to those worn by the dock workers, whatever. So, in such a way that they took part in the revolution against the Prussia and Austria. Okay, so after that, that means the convention. That means on the 10th August 1792, the Jacobin attacked the palace of the Tuileries with the large number of Parisians. They killed the king's guards and held the king himself as hostage for several hours. Later, the assembly voted to imprison two royal families. That means Jacobins attacked on guards of the kings and killed by them. Okay, so after that the elections were held in August 1917, and now all men above the 21 years of age were allowed to vote. The newly elected assembly called the convention. Yes, students, it abolished the monarchy on 21st September 1792, and France was declared as a republic in such a way that France becomes a republic by abolishing the monarchy. The reign of terror. Okay, students, after France become a republic and abolish the monarchy, okay, Jacobin club leader Maximilien Robespierre become as like a dictator of France. Listen, students, the period from 1793 to 1794 is referred to as the reign of terror in France. Robespierre followed a policy of severe control and punishment. Many people were arrested and tried by a revolutionary court. Okay, that means they included all those people who were considered enemies of republic by Robespierre. If the courts found them guilty, then they were guillotined. That means they punished by the court. Churches were shut down and their buildings were converted into the barracks or officers. That means these were the activities of the Robespierre against the, that means for getting the adopting the power in France. Okay, so in such a that slowly Robespierre became a virtual dictator of France. Due to his hard policies, his supporter left him in the end. He was finally convicted by the court and guillotined in July 1794. Okay, beside that, some work had done by the Robespierre. Listen. First, maximum limits set for the wages and prices. Okay, rationing of meat and bread. Peasants to sell grains to government at a fixed prices. So these are the reforms by Robespierre. Or directory rules France. Okay, after the fall of Jacobin, a new constitution was introduced which denied the vote to non-property society. Okay, it provided for two elected legislative councils. These councils appointed a directory and executive made up of the 5 members. It was meant as a safeguard against the concentration of power in a one-man executive. The ideas of freedom, equality, and fraternity remained inspiring ideals that motivated political movements for France and the rest of the Europe. Okay, so this is the directory rules France. That means it released the message about the freedom, equality, and fraternity. But there was one disadvantage. Is what? A new constitution was introduced which denied the vote to the non-propertied society. This was the disadvantage of that directory rule of France. Okay, next, the abolition of slavery. The greatest social reform made by the Jacobin government was to abolish slavery in a French colonies. Okay, students, there was triangular slave trade was going on. Then after all, after the long debates, the National Convention passed a law in 1794. According to that law, that means declared the slavery illegal and freed all slaves in France. So in such a way that In France, there was abolition of slavery in 1794. Then next point, the revolution and everyday life. After 1789, many changes took place in the France, that means in the life of women, men and children in France. One important law that came into effect after the storming of Bastille in the summer of 1789, and that was the abolition of censorship. Students, according to the censorship, all written material and cultural activities could be performed or published only after they had been approved by the censors of the king. But when this law was passed by the constitution, after that, without permission, without approval of the censors of the king or others, we can publish or send the or spread the messages through the newspapers and whatever. Okay, so with the abolition of censorship and the declaration of the rights of the man and the citizens, freedom of speech and expressions became a natural right of the man. This led to the growth of the newspapers, pamphlets, books and printed pictures. Freedom of the press gave voice to opinions and counters opinion. So in such as students, after the French Revolution, the people of the France just become a free and abolish, that means they get freedom from the monarchy finally. Okay, so they got the principles of democracy after all, after the French Revolution. Students, here are some questions. These questions are very important with respect to exam, so you have to write the answer of this question and read also in such a way that the revision of this lesson is completed. Students, in the next online session, I will take the revision of next lesson. So till then, thank you very much and have a nice day.